Welcome to episode 4 of the Tom&Rob chat. Oh, it's funny because I upload to a different YouTube account than I used to just casually watch YouTube. So on my Watcher account, I subscribe to the other thing, and it's actually been putting the shorter one, the Friday night version. That's just the first 10 minutes when we talk about Elon. It's been putting it in my recommended list along with everything else. I'm like, oh, makes it look like a real thing. That's cool and frightening. It's got 11 views as of today, which is interesting. And I forgot to set a special thumbnail. The thumbnail it appears.
Oh, right.
So what it does is it basically picks the middle frame of your video, and it happened to be one where you were kind of smiling like this, and I was doing some weird exaggerated gesture, and I'm like, but that's exactly what those things look like. It looked like I was trying to clickbait it. Like, these guys are really getting into it. It's like, no, that was just the middle frame of our movie. And then I was gonna because I thought I was gonna do the whole smear. So I was gonna make the title about talking about Panama and Carter, and annexing Canada as a state. You know, the more milder stuff. But no, it's like, no, literally we're just talking about Elon for those 10 minutes. So I got to title it that. But that also looks like a clickbait title. I'm trying to get across that we talk about other things than just the politics of the week. But I don't know. And I'm starting to get videos that are like, oh, so you're an older fellow wanting to start a YouTube. I'm like, hello, that's kind of on the nose. And here's how you get your click numbers higher just by doing this and that. I'm like, I would like them to be a little higher, but I don't want them astronomically high either. I still want to preserve the fact that it's just us calling and having a chat. And I don't have too much to say about the politics of the week this week. It's sort of like already kind of got oversaturated in me. And I did notice that when they're doing kind of these videos every day, even just 12 minutes of it, sometimes there's not anything new to say. So they will do another video where they literally say the same thing they said a couple of days ago, kind of recap that and not really add anything to it. I'm like, well, okay. I guess that's what you do. You get trapped in your... Because even I was feeling as a viewer like, hey, he hasn't done anything in 2 days. Where is it? And then so he does when I'm like, he's already said this.
Yeah, not funny.
Yeah, so I'm part of the problem that I'm complaining about. And that reminded me, there was a brief spike in videos for like how Gen Zers are going into the workplace and they're super annoying because they don't really know anything, and they have this kind of attitude like, I don't know how to do that. Why should I do that? Why do I have to come in on time every day? And just sassing off, like in a real, like everyone's their peer. It's like that kid that called me bro in the supermarket. People were like,
oh yeah.
So they're calling their bosses bro and say, oh, hey, what's up? And like, it's just not fitting into the culture of a workplace. And I was kind of feeling superior, like, who do these kids think they are? And then I remembered like how awful I was when I had a first few jobs. I mean, I was not that bad, but I definitely... on the job I had right before I made the movie, I realized there was a good 4 to 6 hours of work a day, but not a good 8. So I started at 9:45, 10 a.m. I'd roll in, because they're just, if I rolled in right on the dot and worked, I'd be done slightly after lunch. So I was trying to time it so that I could pace it out and have a good day's work, do it well, and be out of there at 6. But eventually I got called into one office in a very awkward conversation, like, we've noticed you drift in kind of whenever you want, and then you leave right on the dot at 6. I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, we'd really like you to sit in the chair for 8 hours. We're paying for that 8 hours. I'm like, really? Even if there's nothing to do? And they're like, yeah. So you can roll in late, but then you have to stay to 6:45. And I'm like, okay, seems kind of weird and arbitrary, boss. So I didn't have that great an ad, and I was nearly 30 at the time, so that's where and I remember that conversation. I also said, you always act like you got somewhere better to be than here. And I'm like, I kind of do.
Well, I do.
I do. But this
You
is...
realize I'm working here not because I like it, but because you're paying me.
You're paying me. Really what
Right.
I'm working on is I'm going to make a movie. And that's what's preoccupying me. When I leave at 6, I go and work on the script and stuff like that. But that also shows the benefit of having a job, because you start daydreaming about the project you really want to be working on. Because
Yeah.
Crone happened right after that job ended. Like, I went bang.
Oh, nice.
I took the black globe they had in the office that's in the movie. Because I'm like, it's a globe,
wow.
but it's black. That's perfect. It symbolizes everything about the movie. And I asked permission, can I take the globe? Because they were shutting the whole thing down to move it to Dublin, Ireland for tax purposes. And
Oh. Yeah, that's when a lot of
they asked
US
everybody,
companies-
do you want to come with us to Dublin? And I was the only employee who said no. Because I had been scouting locations. We were about to do auditions. I'm like, no, I'm ready to stay here and work on my movie. And everyone who went was back by within 6 months, kind of demoralized, defeated. One unlucky employee, she got married in kind of a hurry to a guy she'd barely met and moved to Dublin with him. That didn't work out so well. It turned out it wasn't true love that could survive the adventure of going to Dublin. And it's cold, drizzly rain, and shops not being open past 5 in the afternoon, and things that they weren't expecting, having been here in Austin. I have it's just a little life story left over from Christmas. My dad and my nephew and I went for a nice walk around Town Lake, did one orbit, hour-long walk. And when you do that, you tend to see the same people several times. Either because they're coming the opposite direction and you keep passing each other. Or, you drift off to like, hey, look, turtles. And you look at them and then you catch up to them again later. So we kept seeing this young couple in their 20s. And the guy is pushing a little little baby stroller. I'm thinking, oh, it's a young kid. And the girl, I'm like, she at one point, like, took off her sweatshirt. I'm like, wow, for a really young mother, she's really fit. She's looking pretty good. I'm just seeing her from behind in her workout clothes, but she looks good. Lost track of him, came up to him again, and they're walking a little dog. And then she says, okay, I think he's had enough. She picks up the dog, puts the dog in the stroller. There's never been a baby in the stroller. The stroller is for the dog. They took their dog for a walk and pampered him so much, like, oh, he's had enough after 5 minutes. Put him back in. Dogs like to walk. They're the ones who need the walk. It's not the humans that go for the walk and put the dog in a stroller to get, I don't know. So I'm like, okay, maybe it's good that they don't have a little baby, because they're not. And they would spoil it in a very strange way. But that was hilarious to all three of us, especially my nephew and I. And my nephew said, actually, I've seen something weirder than that. I saw someone pushing an aquarium with a fish in it on a stroller going for a walk in Virginia, near the D.C. area where he's growing up. Fish going for what is the fish getting out of this adventure in his bowl? Probably might be traumatizing, because there's so many vibrations and things happening while you're rattling along it.
And you're trying to stay in the bowl. Water's moving.
Water is a great medium for transmitting vibrations. That's why a lot of fish use kind of that sensory perception to do things.
They probably drove the poor Chris crazy.
I'm just wondering, it's like...
Fish, not Chris.
I'm wondering, is this an actual dog stroller? Or is it actually a baby stroller? Or are they marketing just for the people that are so pet precious, they will actually buy a specific dog stroller?
I would not put it past some people.
Yep, that's my perception of the world right now.
We have people in dogs and strollers up our street. Occasionally, usually they're Yorkies or little tiny terriers, and some of them are toy,
Mm-hmm.
So I think the thinking is they're so little that they can't make the hour-long walk or the 45-minute walk that the owners can. I don't know.
I don't know. Well,
But
tiny dogs have tiny little legs, so it's a little harder.
yeah, and they go,
And they all basically have to trot almost, so it's not.
yeah, all the time. So the most interesting thing I saw was real nice couple. They live around the corner, and they have a very old dog. They can't really walk anymore, so they carry it on their walk.
Oh.
And I went, oh, she still likes to see everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I went, okay, but they carry it.
I mean, it's also, I mean, that's very sweet. But the dog in the stroller, one of the things dogs love about going for walks is they can smell everything near the ground and everything's interesting.
Exactly.
So you're depriving it of being able to do that thing of snuffling around. I don't know. It's just takes all kinds, but it's like this is why you go for a walk around the lake, just to see all the
to see stuff like that.
the stuff, the people, the Austinites. There are a lot of like fit Austinites in good shape. I did notice that. Monday the 6th, here we are, 2025, and we're still in this grace period where Biden is still president for a little bit longer. It's
what, a couple of weeks,
and it will get different after the 20th. So we're in just like this little twilight sunset of the past era. So even though it's like it feels like, oh yeah, we're resisting what he's doing and we're talking about it and everything, it's like, yeah, but it hasn't really hit yet. We're resisting from the Biden era. We're still on that side of it. So I get a little spooked when I think about that. Dog strollers. Oh,
I saw a headline that said Hegseth might have the support he needs to become.
Oh, of course. I didn't buy it for a minute.
Secretary.
That their spines would all stiffen and they were like, no, we can't possibly. Yeah, you're going to vote for it. Of course you will. Besides, we let it blow over for like a week and a half. So now people don't remember anymore and it's fine. It's cool.
Right.
I mean, it was like kind of like that watching Mike Johnson get sworn in again. Like I tuned in when he was like missing 3 votes. 1 was a hard no, and 2 they scuttled off into a back room. I actually saw that live. Then I did something else where I came back and like, okay, he got those 2 guys to vote for him. Like, what did he promise those 2 in the back room?
I know, they don't tell you.
They don't tell you.
There were 6 other presidents. Chip Roy was one of them. And they changed their votes from present to pro Mike Johnson. And the reason that's important is if they hadn't voted or if they'd kept present, Hakeem Jeffries would be the Speaker of the House because he got all the Democrat votes, all 215 votes. And without those 6 votes, you count down from 2020 or 220. Well, it's 214.
It was awful close.
And that was why they did it. They said, if you don't, and you know what one person said I don't know if this might be apocryphal, but I read that Mike Johnson just said, okay, do it. Let Hakeem Jeffries, you really want Hakeem Jeffries to be the Speaker?
I mean, if they were smart, they might actually do that. Because then you will at least have a well-functioning House to do your things that you want to do. It will actually function. And he'll take the political heat of being the Speaker. You can dump everything you want onto him without hurting your own party. But they're not going to think that way. They'd have to be strategic and thoughtful.
They think they're withholding, we're going to do this thing to you.
It's our fault. We're taking it.
No, you're doing it to you, dopus. Anyway.
Dopus. Opus Dei, Dopus A. Okay.
Dopus Dei.
I heard a thing about, it's interesting. I had never heard it before that artists are getting, well, there was a lot about AI that I was following up on and like how much it's costing, the voracious billions they're pouring into it. What are they spending it on? Mostly on trying to suck up more data, and they've almost run out of internet to suck up. And people are trying to shut them down and not like, don't steal my art. I know you're doing it. And they've invented, there's a little website that gives an algorithm that like, to a human being, it still looks pretty like your art. but to an AI, it's all screwed up, and they call it poisoning it. It thinks it looks like something else, and it starts mangling new things that it generates using that poisoned data. And Sam Altman came out with a little whiny snit about like, hey, stop doing that. It's like, you wouldn't know I was doing this if you weren't illegally taking my art. Hello? And it's like, so there's subversion on this.
He just admitted to his crime.
He just admitted to it. And there was a Times article from the day after Christmas or something saying that, they're starting to, they were sucking in so much data and it's plateaued. Like they've really, everyone trying to do this at the same time has sort of run out of even the whole internet. Like we've eaten it all. We need voraciously more. We've promised our stockholders that we're going to grow and grow and grow, but we've kind of run out of food to feed this thing. So the headlines are like, has AI run out already? They'll find something to do, but you also read about how much the electrical grid is like, how much resources it's sucking from the earth just to run these chips. It's extraordinary.
It is. It's true. Between that and crypto mining, it's going to take all the energy. All the energy. But yeah, I mean, the whole thing is just so on its head that it grinds my gears as Peter. Oh shoot! What's the Family Guy's last name? Peter.
Griffin. Thank you.
Peter
Griffin.
He had his own show on local Quahog TV station called Grind My Gears. You know what grinds my gears? Actually,
because I was talking last week that I might want to use DVDs to have video sources instead of trying to pull it from streaming, which isn't working.
You mentioned that,
and I forgot about this. But the Vulcan video store, which I was a member of for like nearly 30 years, I still had the original card from the late 80s. It had a really low number on it, and they kept saying, "Yeah, you're still in the computer." Has sort of reopened that brand in a little sort of in the entry hallway of the Alamo Village movie theater. They have a whole bunch of DVDs and it says Vulcan Video. You can rent for a few days and use Alamo to rent and return these things. Like they kept a lot of their inventory even though they shut down all their buildings and came back a little. I'm like, well, maybe I bet they have the Deer Hunter. I can finally finish that episode. So anyway, I just thought I would mention that because I'd forgotten about that. I didn't see any movies really. I'm in the fog of New Year's happening. I did see the Nicole Kidman as a CEO who has a fling with a young guy thing.
What's that called?
Yeah, I do know it's called Babygirl, but it's like I feel like I'm watching an old Cinemax sex thriller movie without any nudity or sex in it. So I'm like, Cinemax was better than this. This just has A-list stars in it instead of B-list stars. It was kind of interesting. The young kid was kind of interesting. I do kind of like Nicole Kidman. It's been more interesting to read female movie reviewers review this movie than male. They're getting more out of it. They're seeing it in different ways. And I'm like, okay. There was more of a point. I was missing it because I'm a guy. I wasn't thinking right. Or feeling how much the power dynamics are a real important point, and they're doing different things with, and that's why it's not supposed to have this sexual payoff because we're not gazing at it from the male perspective. Sorry, guys. It's about something different. I apologize back. Sorry. I just I can't help it. But I was popping into view that the Apple TV show Severance is about to have a second season. 3 years later than their first season. 3 years between and 9 episodes, then a cliffhanger, then 3 years before they roll out and I'm like, is anyone still waiting to see this? Like, actually, yeah, in fact, I kind of am. So I like tried to review it, like, what did I watch? And it was weird because I'm like, I think, because I used to have a pretty good retention memory for things I watched. But I think when I'm binging, especially if I'm binging, I'm really just vegging out, and it's going in, but it's not really staying in. Because I'm like, oh, I forgot John Turturro's in this. There's only 4 characters. Uh-huh. I forgot John Turturro was one of them. Once I saw him, I'm like, oh yeah, he has a thing, and he likes Christopher Walken's character, and it's a whole thing. And then I kind of remembered it, but 5 minutes earlier, I didn't remember that at all. I was surprised to see him. And I'm like, I watched this show. I saw every episode, but I probably saw it in like 2.5 days. And it just went, boom, out the back of my head. So I'm kind of worried about that. Because the fact that I could watch something and really not remember. Another thing I did was I replayed a video game I played a few years ago. It's a bunch of puzzles. And that's fun. You can let your brain kind of forget the puzzles and go back to it. And I'm like, I don't remember I kind of remember this first scene at the beginning and then this other scene 2 hours in, but I had forgotten the central game mechanic, like what you're supposed to do. It's like, I solved every puzzle in between these things, and I don't remember. Why don't I remember any of it? Because I remembered I liked it and I wanted to get back to it someday.
Yeah.
I don't know. Just the age and strangeness is. There was one. What was it? There was a guy who's a computer programmer who has been noticing, like, there was a giant collapse of the, like, sort of Byzantine Bronze Age world civilization in 1277 BC or something. And he's like, and we're kind of close to a thing like that now where, Rome took 300 years to kind of degrade and fall apart. And they didn't notice that was happening at the time until it was done and there's no more Roman Empire. And he's like, but just as a software engineer, it seems like our software is getting better and better. He's like, I'm telling you, it's not. It's getting worse and worse. And they started with like a core thing that was really tightly written, and they're just putting stuff on top of that. And we've been being carried on the shoulders of hardware making huge leaps. The hardware is getting so much faster every year. We can write messier and messier software to run on it. And it seems like it's running just fine, where in the old days they really had to like do optimization on trying to get every last cycle out of the thing. And he's like, and spaghetti tangled piled up code degrades really fast, and you might lose a whole generation of engineers that just really don't know how any of this works anymore. No one really knows how a CPU works anymore. And no one really understands anything. And we're all living our lives floating on this, thinking this will be here forever. And he's like, I'm here to tell you. He went on a binge to like, let me take a screenshot every time I see like a what looks like a bug in a something from Google, something, everything he's using. And he's like, I stopped after 3 days because I was taking so many screenshots. It was clear the point was made. And they're all just dumb errors. Or it's like when I was complaining about my television set having this thing where it something overflows in a buffer and then the screen starts going like every couple of days. And some channels trigger it more than other channels.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, what signal are they pumping out that makes my TV especially mad at it? But I'm like, it's a software error. But there's nowhere to report this as a bug. Hey, fix this, Samsung. What? But they have, they hire thousands of coding engineers a year. I don't know what they all do with their time. Do they each write 1 3-line piece? And he's like, things... the core code running things used to be 10,000 lines long, and now it's 30 million. And no one knows, they might see one section of that 30 million lines. And he had this example of like, okay, you take a a text file and from the web, and you print it on the screen. Sounds easy, but you're running your iOS, your operating system, all the infrastructure of the web, the operating system that's sending you the thing, the display mechanism, and he counts it all up, and there's like almost 100, maybe it wasn't that, 55 million lines of code to print this web, text file, because it's all connected together. And if one of those doesn't work, you don't see the thing on the screen. And he's like, it should not be, it should be 3 lines of code to print a text file. It's not, because you've got to sit on top of all this infrastructure now. And we went wrong somewhere along the way because, the engineers I knew, the computer science guys 20 years in the 99, 2000 era, were still obsessed about this. Optimizing code, really knowing techniques for doing that. And now they're just like hiring these young engineers, the Gen Z people, that just expect it to work and haven't learned that much about how, and don't care that much about optimization because they don't have to. They've just known super fast screaming graphics cards and hardware, and they don't have to know the nitty gritty. I don't know. These are things that seem nightmarish when you put it all together with all the other warning signs that are going on in the world.
Maybe that should be their final exam. Okay, you're the support engineer for Apollo 13, and you have to write a program with 4 kilobytes of data. 4 kilobytes of memory, because that's all that computer had.
Right.
And you've got to test it here and make sure there's no bugs, because they get one shot at it.
And they land on the moon and come back.
Well, to Apollo 13, it was to reboot the thing in a different mode, so that the LEM would keep them alive.
Right.
As their lifeboat. And but yeah, it was like I was remembering, I was going, oh yeah. And they had to, that was back in the day when there was only the way you got a program into the computer in 1970.
Yeah.
You typed it in and telemetried that thing up there, and you typed in the lines, and then you said run, and then the thing ran.
Yep.
Right? Because that's the way they worked back then. And so there was no upload a file. There was no any of that nonsense. In fact, I think they might have, I may be wrong about this, but they may have had to send the lines up to the astronauts, and they had to code it in.
Yeah.
Line by line by line by line.
By line.
And they had 4 kilobytes of memory on that thing. I think that's right. Is it 4 kilobytes?
That sounds right to me. Yeah.
And the kids today got kilobyte. What's a kilobyte?
What's a kilobyte? Yeah. So yeah.
1/1000th of a megabyte.
Right. If that makes any sense to you, megabytes. What?
Did you ever use a computer like the PDP-8 or any of those where, like the PDP-8? I remember this because it was in my high school, and it was their fancy computer. It was a mini, and they had teletype terminals.
Mm-hmm.
And you typed in your code, and when you debugged it, you ran it, and when you debugged it, then you saved it, and it printed out your program on paper tape with holes in it. And that's how you read the thing back in when you wanted to run the program. So you had to dump all that stuff out of memory so the next guy could put his in and do the thing. You couldn't store it. That's how you stored it.
We had, it was a few years later than you. We had the TI 99.4As.
Yeah.
And they could save to a cassette tape. It would make all these weird honking noises, which I guess is a digital representation of the digital file. I still have a cassette tape that has that on it. I don't know. Maybe actually now there might be something on the web that will interpret that audio into a running game again.
I had at one point for a Trash 80, I had the Radio Shack tape recorder that you would plug into the Trash 80 to record and read programs off a cassette tape.
I love even the people that liked using the TRS-80 still call it a Trash 80, kind of affectionately. Yeah, I remember when the Austin Public Libraries had, what were they called? PET machines and stuff.
Who made those?
I almost think that's a related company. It might have been its own company at the time. Who made the PET? Commodore. Before they made the Commodore 64, they did the Commodore PET.
Nice.
I don't remember what it stands for. PET, personal technology. I don't know what it means. Yeah, these really do seem like ancient technologies. Yeah.
Because a lot of computers had smart and dumb terminals that attached to them.
Right.
Like the newspaper I worked for, the Daily Texan, it ran on a PDP-11, which was the really, and a lot of newspapers actually ran on PDP-11s, and they had the terminals I wrote my stories on were dumb terminals.
Right.
So they had no memory in them. You had to log in and you were in, and then you could write your story and you could save your story, or I believe you could save it in the system, pull it up, edit it, and then there was a command for sending it to the RIM. And they would pull it up on their, I only remember the numbers, I don't remember the letters in front of it, but I was on a 62 and they were on a 72. Mm-hmm. And the 72 was the smart terminal, so it could actually hold it in memory there, edit it, work on it with you, and then send it on through the system.
I was there not long after you were, just for one summer at the Daily Texan in 1988. The summer before I went off to college. And they weren't supposed to, because I wasn't going to go to UT, but I was kind of a friend of the editor at the time, and he was a cool guy. He's like, yeah, this is a great summer job for you. Yeah. And so I was a copy editor. So I would, and it was a pretty much text terminal. But I could go in and I could edit, proofreading mistakes in the article. And it was my job to write the headline. They're like, yeah, the article writer doesn't write the headline. You have to write the headline. But you have to make sure it fits into one column or two.
Fit the head.
Fit it. And it would just, it would basically just stop printing characters if it was too long. There was no what you see is what you get. And so you had to have a good idea of how wide, a W was wider than a lowercase I, and you're trying to change your words so like you're getting across the point of the article, you're making it fit, and you're not being too clever by half and like trying to show off somehow with a pun or something like that. So it was a very good, very disciplined little technical job, and it was on these little terminals.
We had to do it too.
Yeah, and so that was 88. They were still using that, and I'm sure 4 years later they had Macs or something in the room or something. I don't know.
Right, they did. And then you could see the layout as you're working on it and how the story would fill a hole or not fill a hole, and what the headline looked like over it. And 2-column headlines are tough, but occasionally they do 1-column headlines.
Right.
And those are really tough because if you don't give a person like that many rows, how do you write a headline for that? It's like, I can't put more than a word in there. This is
why that funny headline speak that The Onion copied, like, Senator to address crowd, because you're trying to fit it in.
Yeah, that's why you came up with something.
Imagine doing this upside down, backwards in lead type, and you have to know how to do all that.
And you have to worry about double entendres, unintended double entendres.
Unintended ones.
They are all over newspapers from that era, and one of my favorites was windy resumes blow jobs. Think about that for a second.
I still occasionally see where there's like and ambiguity because a word can be a noun or a verb or part of a phrase. Yes. And the New York Times, I'm like, I can't parse this headline. Oh, that's what he meant. You know, like Mars or doctor can be to alter something, or about an actual doctor, or the planet Mars, or mucking up something. There's certain. I just saw one recently, but I don't remember it off the top of my head. But I'm like, I had to stare at it and go, oh, that's the noun, not the verb. Okay, I get it.
The planet, not the verb.
The planet, not the verb. Yes. Anyway.
No, yeah, it's like all those little things you notice it and your editor will say, put a big red circle around. And you thought that was. I remember there was this goof up in the Texan where a car came across highway, right? And it said, car jumps meridian. It's head on. And he goes, what's wrong with this, folks? And I said, you meant median, not meridian. Meridian that's geographical.
Way in the middle of the ocean,
speak.
I think.
Exactly. That's geographical speak. A median is something that separates two lanes of traffic. And and you're going fast. You're on deadline. You're going as fast as you can, because there's a point. Like all us reporters, if we didn't have a story in by X amount of time,
it's not in there.
It didn't get in.
Yeah.
I remember I was 5 minutes late calling from a meeting, and they said, we can't use the story. And I went, I'm 5 minutes late. And they said, your hold closed. There's something else in it now.
Yeah.
And I went, okay. Well, I guess I wasted sitting through a city council meeting for however long.
Yeah.
But anyway, I learned the hard way. When they tell you to call in by a certain time, you better call in. And all they want you to do is like, okay, here's what happened. And then they make the news decision. Okay, that's worth a story. We'll hold on to the whole we saved for you. Or they say, there's no news. I mean, that's we're going to give that up. We're going to give that whole up to some other story. And so I didn't even get to that point because they had to give up the whole because I hadn't called in on time.
Right.
And I think it was 5:30, and this meeting was going till 6. So, like an idiot, I thought, well, shouldn't I wait till the end of the meeting? And then I realized, no, he said I had to call by 5:30. So 5:35, I'm calling. Too late.
All those old movies where reporters are running to the phones to call in their story.
Yeah, that's why they did it.
They got to get in or they don't. And my little part of the job is like, you have to get all these things done by, it was like 11 p.m. or something, because then we go to press overnight, but this part is done.
One person on the rim is taking too long to copy edit the story and write ahead, then the managing editor, whoever's heading up the rim, is going to say, what the hell's going on down there?
Yeah.
Keep this stuff moving.
I mean, this was cool. It's like it's a college newspaper, but it's modeled after a really big professional newspaper. They had all the same. Yeah. Like, this is how you do a newspaper for real.
It's a daily newspaper,
cranking up the presses and like getting that thing out every morning.
We had union press guys.
I met
running the presses.
The cartoonists who were there in a golden age of cartooning at the Texan. They were all like super talented cartoonists, like professional level artwork. But they'd be racing the deadline too, so they'd be up there doing their last inking so they could get it in, or it wouldn't run in the next paper, and they have to do that every day, 5 days a week, because it's a daily paper.
We had Burt Breathed, Sam Hurt, and then Robert Rodriguez.
Right, I was there when Robert was
Hooligans.
there. Los Hooligans.
Which he named his production company.
Yes.
Later on.
Yeah. And you can see like, and this is it turns into Spy Kids, which is now in the National Registry of Movies, the first Spy Kids movie.
Oh, wow. Well, it was a cute little movie.
It was a cute little movie.
It was cleverly done.
At one point, like Steven Spielberg said, my kids love that. I'm like, well, that's good for you, Robert, isn't it? That Spielberg's kids love Spy Kids. That won't hurt your career any. Yeah, those were the days.
Yeah.
Just one last thing that was like, I just saw this today. There's been a show forever called Democracy Now! Little news show.
Oh yeah.
You know, Democracy Now! Amy Goodman and the War and Peace Report. So they had a little thing. It was buried. I'm like, you buried the lead on this one. 10 minutes into an interview with, some professor that's been like watching ultra capitalists with a wary eye for a long time. And then all of a sudden Amy Goodman says, let me read you this. And I can't remember, I was going to save a clip of this. But it was like, there are 4 or 5 50-year-old very rich people. Elon's one, Peter Thiel's another. There's another like equity or venture capital guy. And there's this fairly obscure, she said, like tech journalist that people did a linguistic analysis on his writing and said he might have been the first one to post as QAnon. He denies it, but someone else ran it again and said it's quite like there's a high percentage based on his writing that he was writing those things in the early days.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so they're all in their 50s. They're all very rich South Africans now. They all grew up in that slightly pre-apartheid ending 70s and 80s. And she's like, this is kind of remarkable how many of them there are, aren't? And their interviewee's like, yes, it is, isn't it? And don't think this didn't shape their worldview somehow. And they saw weird, tough things and thought, well, it's I don't know, me versus them kind of world, and I'm going to be the one that's me, not or something. But I'm like, I didn't know there were 4 or 5. I thought there was 1 or 2. Anyway, but the QAnon thing blew my mind. Like, really? Could that really be a thing?
I only knew of Thiel and Musk. I didn't know.
Yeah, I need to look up the other guy because I'm don't take this as a breaking news report because this is now. It was written somewhere. Amy Goodman read it out loud. I tried to remember it and tell you several hours later, so I need to get that actual quote. But it was from today's episode of Democracy Now! That I saw. Anyway.
Oh, interesting.
All right, I'll see you next time. Have a good week. Hang in there. Keep your chickens warm.
Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.